Welcome back to the Hockey Hub. As mentioned before we went to break, Conor Ryan of Boston.com joins us. Sophia and Natalie here with you. We're continuing a conversation where it started with Conor's excellent article. He had a one-on-one with newest Bruins head coach Marco Sturm, and you guys can go to Boston.com to read it. Lots of details in there. I feel like I want to address everything, but because we kind of dive into these topics, Conor, we won't be able to get to everything. You just finished explaining the vibe you got of what Marco Sturm's style might be, and something that's been consistent is that you said he's been clear that, of course, they want to make the playoffs, but this might be a little bit of a longer-term goal of which how he's going to take the team. So that being said, the youth might have more looks, or, you know, he's really keen on developing them. So before we get there about his thoughts on it, what were yours from development camp? Like I said, would love to see them have some NHL time sooner than later, but I know that's not always the smartest move. What have been your thoughts? Did anyone stand out to you in development camp?
Yeah, I think you look at where this team was this year as far as their dev camp roster. I think there was a lot of emphasis on skill. I think you saw that with this recent draft class. It helps when you have a guy like James Hagens as your headliner of your 25 draft class, but I even look at someone like Vasek Blanar, who is their 4th-round pick, 6'4" defenseman, didn't pop up in a lot of draft rankings, so you wonder if this is a guy that they went really off the board for, but kind of reminds you a little bit of Mason Lohrei, who wasn't really ranked that high going into his draft year as well, but you see the skills that they have, right? A 6'4", 6'5" defenseman with really offensive instincts, and he's a guy, Blanar, that's pretty raw. Like, he's still has to work on his D zone a little bit more, needs to add some weight, but you like the skill set there. And I think the Bruins, where they've been hindered, I think, in the past by, bringing up prospects that, have a high floor, maybe their ceiling isn't impactful at the NHL level. I think it's maybe a little bit of a change of pace and probably something they need to do, where if you are trying to swing for the fences and bring up impactful players, it's trying to find those guys like Blanar. It's trying to, target a guy like Dean Letourneau, who I know didn't have a strong first year at BC, but you still like the skill set and what he provides. And I thought Dean Letourneau actually had a really good end to dev camp, where I think everyone knows about his stats his first year at BC. He probably shouldn't have been at Boston College as a freshman. Going right from prep to Hockey East is a sizable jump. But he's a guy that you see the skill, you see the puck work that he has, his ability to generate chances from in tight, but also a guy that's 6'7". I think you saw him be a lot more assertive later on in the scrimmage of using his body. And I think you look at what Dean Letourneau can be. Is he going to be Tage Thompson, like people said he was going to be right after he was drafted? No, that's not fair to the player to compare him to a guy like that, a 40-goal scorer, just because he's also 6'7". But I think you see what Dean Letourneau did during the scrimmage of fighting down low, winning puck battles. He had a good reverse hit on Christian Kostadinsky, who's a 6'6" defenseman in the Bruins system as well. If he can translate that to his second year at BC and play more into grade A ice, be more assertive down there, he has the skill with the puck to, generate chances and get rebounds and, recover pucks and all that. So I think this is going to be a big year for Letourneau. I expect him to be a 4-year player at Boston College, but if he can take a step forward this year, feel good about his game, score some goals, and just feel like he's on the right track, I think that's a guy that, is he going to be a top 6 center? That remains to be seen, but I look at even a guy like Brian Boyle, right, who was at a Boston College, 6'7", ended up being a matchup nightmare in the bottom 6 for a lot of teams for a long time and had a very productive NHL career. If Dean Letourneau can be that player for you a couple years down the road, that adds value, right? Like, as much as everyone wants a first-round pick to be a top 6 franchise player, 30 goals, 40 goals, all that, if you're able to fill out your roster with a couple of guys here and there, whether it's Letourneau, Hagens, Will Zellers, it just makes the whole rest of your team that much better down the road when you have the pieces in place that can complement the usual suspects, right? The Pasternaks, the McAvoys, the Swayman. So, as you said, a couple years away for a lot of these players, but I think there's a lot to like about the upside that they have in their system, which wasn't the case even a year, 2 years ago.
It's really exciting. Someone who works in Hockey East over here, that Boston College has entered the conversation so heavily with the Boston Bruins. You've got Hagens, Letourneau, Gasso, a couple of other Eagles. It's just exciting. And I think it's been fun because whenever I get to cover the Eagles down at BC, it's like, okay, I'm keeping an eye on some of the Boston draft picks too and seeing how they're doing. And, there was a little bit of a question mark with Dean Letourneau this year. Talking with Greg Brown, he said it's a huge jump for someone of his age to come from Canadian Prep to go to Hockey East. Early on, I think it was about November, he was saying he's done a nice job easing in, but we're hoping that he will be that offensive contributor soon. You mentioned, he's finding a way to be more assertive, physical. What's interesting, I talked to Sophia about this, is I didn't realize he had a broken hand all season with BC too. Yeah. Went home during the Christmas break, got surgery on it, came back and continued to play. So, tough kid, young kid, but tough. And he's got his head, his laser focus on the goal there. So I think it's really cool to see what he will be doing. As well as James Hagens too, just to stick with BC there. I think, something I read in your article as well was just that a lot of the players with the Bruins are asking Marco, hey, what about the Hagens kid? Or they're showing excitement for the next wave of prospects. How encouraging is that when you talk about developing some kind of future excitement for this team? How exciting is it to know that the team is also excited in return and that they've got their eyes on the younger generation?
Yeah, I think it's really encouraging because especially if you look just from, the perspective of a guy like Hagens, it's not set in stone what he's going to do next year. I imagine probably the best path for him is to go back to BC, I think, dominate like a lot of people expect him to as a sophomore now that he has a year under his belt, feel good about his game, and then potentially join the Bruins once BC's season's over in, March or April. I think that's probably the most realistic course of action, kind of following what Ryan Leonard did this past year, going, having a Hobie Baker level campaign and then jumping into the Capitals at the end of the season. And I think if you're a Bruins player, right, and you're looking for optimism for the long-term outlook of this franchise, having a guy like James Hagens, who a lot of players know about. It's not just the fact that, you see him at Dev Camp and you see the skating, you see the edge work, especially just how dynamic of a skater he is. But this is a guy that for 2 years, right, was considered the consensus #1 prospect. I still find it pretty wild that he dropped all the way to 7 because the talent is evident. And this is a guy that, again, you look at how he fared as a freshman at BC, getting knocked for being only a point per game as a 17 going on 18-year-old against the toughest competition, in college hockey, in Hockey East. I feel like he's going to be a player that even early on this fall, a lot of other teams are going to be like, oh, we probably should have taken him, huh? Because, I don't think it's a stretch to look at just what he did this past year, what his track record has been with the national development team, in international competition, and not expect him to put up a 50-point season as a sophomore on, again, a still very good BC team where, yes, he doesn't have Ryan Leonard and Gabe Perreault as his line mates, but I think it's going to benefit him of being maybe more of a puck-dominant, assertive type of player because I think when you have guys like Leonard, you're naturally going to defer to them quite a bit, especially in the offensive zone. But Hagens is a guy that's so effective with the puck on his stick, and he's so deceptive, especially with his skating, that the more he just has puck touches, he's going to make stuff happen. And I think having him be more assertive going into his second year at BC is going to benefit him. And I think it's going to be encouraging for the Bruins when you see him probably stuff the stat sheet going forward this year. He's a very special talent and a guy that I didn't think could be up with this team by the very end of the season.
I really like that trajectory because I've been kind of back and forth. At first, when he was drafted, I was like, okay, there's no way he's going to play in the NHL next year. Everyone chill out. And then in spending time at development camp and then obviously talking to writers or assistant coaches, then I was like, well, actually, maybe there is an opportunity here and maybe it wouldn't be too bad. But I think we'll see how it plays out, but I think that's a perfect medium, right? Where he finishes his season in BC, hopefully puts up good numbers, develops a little more, continues to put on weight, all that kind of stuff, and then maybe makes an appearance at the end of the season, as you mentioned, or nearing towards the end of the season.